Hello, I'm Chancellor Emeritus James Moeser. Joining us today for the 9th installment in our series, Good to Great at Carolina, is Barbara Reimer, Dean of the UNC Gillings School of Global Public Health. In our series to this point, we've heard stories of schools and programs here on this campus that have made the journey from good to great. But today, we're focusing on a different challenge to leadership, maintaining and expanding greatness. UNC's School of Global Public Health has been a top-tier school for a long time. It's nationally ranked, along with Johns Hopkins and Harvard University. We'll talk with Dean Reimer about how she and her colleagues have continued the school's success while fighting the challenges of complacency and self-satisfaction. If UNC is a gem within our state of North Carolina, then the Gillings School of Global Public Health is a gem within the university. It's one of 50 schools of public health nationally, the fourth oldest, celebrating its 75th birthday in 2014. With more than 200 full-time faculty and about 1,700 students, two-thirds of whom are North Carolina residents, the school has expertise in almost every imaginable area of public health. The UNC Gillings School of Global Public Health is also a major public enterprise, receiving $154 million in research grants this past year. And this is really interesting. For every tax dollar invested, the school generates at least $5 for the North Carolina economy. That's a great story. Welcome, Barbara. It's wonderful to have you with us here. And I want to just start off with a couple of so what questions, and then ask you to talk about leadership and strategy as you lead this wonderful enterprise on this campus. So give us some example of, and our viewers, some examples of how your faculty are really tackling some of the great health problems that actually, and that face the world. And I should say, we inserted the word global into this school because you were really dealing with health around the world, not just locally.
Absolutely, James. And thank you so much for inviting me and for having me here today. I really think of you as a Zen master when it comes to leadership. So
Thanks.
Thank you. Well, I'll give you a few examples of our work in North Carolina and our impact. And a couple of those examples, I think, also speak to that issue that you talked about of the global aspect. So in our school structurally, we have a part of the school that's devoted to service and outreach to North Carolina, and that's our North Carolina Institute for Public Health.
Right.
And I think it's really important that we have that focus area that really its mission is to reach out, but all parts of the school reach out. So let me give you a couple examples. Jen Horney is a faculty member in epidemiology, and she's based in the North Carolina Institute for Public Health. And she runs something called Team Epi-Aid. So whenever there is a natural disaster in North Carolina particularly, she organizes a group of faculty, staff, and students who go out to help the people in that area. And I think one of the greatest examples was Hurricane Floyd, which was really devastating to some very poor communities in North Carolina. And Jen took groups of people out there for weeks and months on end. They not only helped residents, but they mapped the area, they identified needs, they helped write grants. It's really an enduring kind of impact on a community. Steve Meshnick is doing work that is both global and local. So Steve is concerned about malaria, but he's also concerned about ticks. And he's been working with a company that it started out as, it was called Buzz Off. Now it has a slightly less interesting name, but they create clothing that's impregnated with an insecticide, and it's specially for outdoor workers. So there are outdoor workers in North Carolina, there were outdoor workers in Thailand, and Steve is doing a randomized trial to see how good this clothing is. And it's an example of our research being very practical that can help people immediately, but it also has longer term consequences. And workers in North Carolina and in Thailand are concerned about ticks. So I think it's a great example. As you know, obesity is a major problem in North Carolina and the U.S. and increasingly around the world. And Alice Ammerman is one of our faculty members. You know Alice well. And she's also head of the Center for Health Promotion and Disease Prevention. Alice works with North Carolina communities that are primarily minority and low income. And she's helped them to become healthier. So one of the ways she does that is by working with churches in communities, trying to make the church suppers healthier,
Right.
developing church gardens. She's even become involved, really woven into the fabric of the community. She helped one community set up a small microfinance business called Threads of Hope, where they're now selling bags that, the kind of bag you get when you go to a conference.
Right.
For the first time, some of the women in this community actually have income. So, I think this is an example that yes, we do health. We focus on making people healthier, but we also understand that health isn't disengaged from the economics of a community. And I think that's been really one of the important kinds of lessons that we've learned. And I want to give just one final example. So most summers in North Carolina, we have had drought, not the kind of really horrendous rainfall that we've had this summer. And that means that some communities have water shortages, while others may have water because they have bigger reservoirs or whatever. And Greg Shiraklis is a wonderful, dynamic faculty member in environmental sciences. And Greg comes from an economic perspective, and he's helped to develop the whole concept of water credits and trading water credits. So he started out by working with the municipalities around Jordan Lake. So, Orange County, Durham, Chatham, and then Cary. And they now have an arrangement where if one gets low on water, they can actually trade water credits and share from Jordan Lake and not have to build billions of dollars of investment in new reservoirs. And, thinking back many years ago, before you or I were here, Dan Oken was the chair of environmental sciences. And it's because of Dan Oken and fighting for the Cane Creek Reservoir that Chapel Hill doesn't have a water shortage. Yeah. Now, this summer we have way more water than we would want here. But it shows that our faculty are not just researchers who are sitting in laboratories, which is, we need those people. But they are thinking about the impact of their work on the state and on the citizens of the state. And I'm really proud of that. I'm proud that we're in 100 counties in North Carolina.
I think your school is the best example of what we call engaged scholarship.
It is. I think we defined engaged
I think you do
scholarship,
too.
Don't you?
I do. And in fact, I was just thinking as you were speaking, one of the things I enjoyed most when I was chancellor was every year taking the Tar Heel bus tour across the state. And we would usually go, actually from coast to the mountains and north to south, and touch as much of the state as we could for new faculty to sort of introduce them to the state. But it was also a way for the university to show up in those small towns as well as the cities. But we always ran into the activities of faculty in the School of Public Health.
We're everywhere.
There's hardly a place you can go in this state that isn't, as you say, all 100 counties. The school, your faculty really, and I think, as I think about it, the school really, that's been part of your DNA from the very beginning.
It is, from the earliest days. And I think our school acutely feels the presence of North Carolina. I mean, we really have a sense that we owe something to the state and that we have something of value. All of our students who are getting master's degrees do internships. Most of them are in North Carolina. Even if they're not.
I think only the School of Government could have claims that equal yours with regard to touching every hamlet, county, as well as the largest cities of the state. And I love the fact that your point that it's more than health.
It is.
Because you can't talk about health without talking about quality of life, economy,
housing,
poverty, race, all of these cultural issues that are part of the fabric.
They're all interconnected.
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful story. So now, in 2008, you made the decision as dean to add the word global.
I did.
What's the implication of that change, and what does that mean?
Well, it was a big change because we were the first school of public health who took on the name global. And when I think about it, when I look back on it, it was a very risky thing to do because I could have lost a lot of the support and the the love of people in North Carolina.
Was there some? Was this a hot topic inside the school when this, or how did you handle this?
Well, there was a small pocket of resistance,
Yeah.
but the small pocket of resistance was extremely aggressive, and they were doing freedom of information requests.
Fear that you would give up on the commitment to the
Yes.
state.
That, and they were afraid that because we were also taking on the Gillings name, that
Right.
somehow we were going to be manipulated by an
I see.
outside force who was going to tell me and us what to do.
Right.
And I knew that I had to prove that that wasn't going to happen. I think over time that happened. But the global, I thought that we had not gotten as much credit as we should have for our global activities over the years, that people just didn't know about them the way they knew about what Harvard and Hopkins
Right.
did globally. And I thought that with this gift, we had a minute, we had kind of a window for a game change, and that the name change could actually be a game changer
Right,
for us,
right.
that we could dominate the conversation for a while. And by taking on that name, we did. I mean, my first dean's meeting, dean's retreat with School of Public Health deans after the name change, there was a big conversation about should schools of public health become global schools of public health. They didn't, and I think partly because they didn't want to be followers. I think they didn't want
Right.
to all fall in our wake. But a number of schools, including Tulane after that, changed department names to, the Department of Global Public Health or Global Health Policy and Management or
Right,
something like
right.
that. So there's no question that it changed the conversation, and it got us taken more seriously as a global school. It also has meant that we have to be really careful about the language that we use. For example, we constantly talk about global and local,
Right,
the
right, right.
interconnection of global and local, so that we don't lose the people in the state. And, I think there was a lot of scrutiny of me for a couple of years to make sure that I wasn't turning my back on North Carolina. And I think we've shown to people that that's not the case, that we are more committed than ever to North Carolina.
I agree. I think if there was ever a doubt, and now we've dispelled those doubts.
Yeah.
But I'm still curious about how the conversation with your own faculty changed as a result of thinking globally as well as locally.
I don't think it can be separated from the gift. So, getting a $50 million gift, getting that kind of recognition, I think people came away, I think they got more confidence as a result. I think they saw that we had distinguished ourselves in a way that formerly, really, only the privates had
Right,
gotten.
right.
Our gift was equal then to the gift that Johns Hopkins had gotten. And that can't be distinguished from the global, but I think that then having some resources to globalize our courses. So a number of our courses we've actually taken and added global content so that they're both global and local. It's made faculty, staff, and students, I think, a lot more broad in their thinking about the school. And there's no question it's gotten the attention of students who we would not have gotten before.
So you've mentioned the gift several times, so let's talk about that. What year was it?
2008.
2008, you sat in our living room at
Yes.
Hill with Susan and I, with you and your husband,
Yes.
with Dennis and Joan Gillings.
Yes.
Dennis Gillings being the founder of Quintiles
Quintiles.
International, and by the way, an alumnus or faculty member from the school.
Faculty member.
Quintiles being
Started in a trailer.
literally a startup from
Yes.
a trailer on this campus.
Right.
Unfortunately, we didn't have the mechanisms in place at
No.
that time that we have now to
Right.
to have some equity in that firm.
Right.
But nonetheless, it was a great achievement of the school.
It was.
And a great venture by him. And in fact, I remember him telling us that night, a lot of people thought he was absolutely nuts.
Right, they did.
To move into a trailer and start a company.
I know.
And
to
why-
leave the, kind of the confines of academia and the safety and
Right. And in fact, I think a lot of his faculty colleagues thought that he was sort of turning his back. So it was actually it was an adventuresome thing for him to do.
it was. It was.
But then he came back and obviously $50 million to name the school, but what you're saying is that it was a transformative gift.
It was a transformative.
So
It
how-
is a
Yeah,
transformative
how
gift.
does it? So how has it continued to transform the school?
Well, I think one of the most important ways was the way we invested the gift. So we create the two biggest components of the gift were creating Gillings Innovation Laboratories, GILS, and creating a visiting professor and entrepreneur in residence.
Right.
Actually, the entrepreneur in residence has been incredibly important, even in ways that I would never have thought. So Don Holsworth has been with us for several years. Don started and sold several companies, very successful man. But he's able to sit in meetings with us and look at us in a very different way than we look at ourselves. And he'll say, "You're making this way too complicated," or, or I think we need to talk to people in the university. There are too many barriers to starting a company or whatever. And it's often a very liberating experience to have somebody like that who can look at you as both an insider and an outsider. And he's just been there to give me wonderful advice. I think he's probably the most candid person with me.
Yeah.
And, from leadership, you have to have kind of a hands-off relationship with a lot of the people that work for you, but to have somebody who is there and taken the time to really learn about your organization, who can give you feedback of a really experienced leader is it's priceless. It's wonderful.
And someone who's not encumbered by a whole history inside the academy.
Exactly. But the innovation laboratories, I think, really distinguished our school among schools of public health.
What are those?
So the idea was, I put as a fundamental part of the gift that we asked for to devote funds to creating these laboratories. The idea was that they would be potentially high risk, high payoff. So the kind of research that NIH probably wasn't going to fund and isn't going to fund. And some of the outcomes of that research, Will Viswete, who we funded to create kind of a miniaturized version of a smog chamber that, like the one we have on our building, which is very large and definitely not portable. Will has started a company called Biodeptronics. He's gotten NSF funding. He's really able to do things now that he never could have envisioned before. A number of faculty were able to get very important pilot data that allowed them to get very large NIH grants. But it infused and added a language of innovation into the school that I think has been really important. University of Michigan now has an entrepreneur in residence. They didn't have that before. I'm not saying they're copying us, but
they probably did.
Maybe.
That's right.
And the whole language of innovation now is something that we regularly talk about in the school and beyond the school. We've legitimized setting up companies. We've encouraged it. Several of our students have set up companies. In fact, I was really excited. I went to the launch event that Judith Cohn had this year.
Right.
And three of our faculty out of 17 presentations, they were School of Public Health faculty. That never would have happened in the past. So it's just
exactly the opposite of the culture that Dennis Gillings faced when he started his own company.
Exactly. And partly I wanted to create a culture that recognized that one way that we disseminate our work and take it to scale is by setting up companies. It is a venue.
Do you even know can you quantify how many companies have actually been formed during this period, or is it?
There are at least 6, and some are still in development, but at least 6, and I don't think they would have happened otherwise.
I'm sure that's right, and this is probably just the beginning of a
I think so,
curve.
And we've become part of the group that Judith Cohn calls on. We're at those key meetings. We've worked with Joe DeSimone and others in the university. So we now have access to an entirely new way of thinking that we never would have had before. And I really think that idea of worlds colliding, that you put people together that you wouldn't have expected, that in their daily lives, Joe DeSimone would not be over at the School of Public Health.
Right.
But we invited Joe to give a lecture. It was a packed house. Joe thinks about innovation in a different way.
Right.
We had Bubba Cunningham come over to the School of Public Health. He was asking wonderful questions about environmental sciences. And so I think think a lot of that has happened because of that gift.
Well, this is also, in my intro, I had five-fold return on just
Yes,
federal dollars.
right.
But this is another way the school is actually pumping
It
energy
is.
into the
It
North
is.
Carolina
It
economy.
is. It is.
So it's an important message that this kind of transference of intellectual property and energy directly into the economy, we're creating jobs, we're creating a more robust economy. And this is the economy of the 21st century.
It is. And James, I think it's really telling that at least 60% of our students who came here as non-residents actually end up staying in North Carolina. So the students who come here from outside the state fall in love with this place.
Right.
They get jobs here, and they're educated people who are contributing to the state.
And that's a powerful story, too.
It is.
It's how we are importing talent.
Yes.
And they're staying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So let me turn now to how you lead obviously a dynamic institution, which is the global School of Global Public Health. How do you plan? How do you strategize? How do you in a short? How do you lead?
Well, I do think that that Jim Collins has some really important lessons, and among them are thinking about what you're best at,
Right.
and where you can be the best. And right from my before I even became the dean, I really thought about that in terms of the School of Public Health. And so there had been several planning exercises right before Bill Roper stepped down, and they did a good job, and they identified really some of the great opportunities for the school, like obesity, where we have, we are number one, or one, two. I think we're number one, but
in the whole area of obesity.
Yeah,
and I can't think of a more important area to be.
Oh my God! I mean, it is global and local. There's no question about it. But so we identified several areas like that: water, and health disparities, and global health, and cancer, where we decided, we got buy-in not to immediately start another planning process, but to really focus people on those topics. And so one of the ways I lead has been in really looking at our strengths and then trying to make us even stronger in those areas. And recognizing that you cannot be all things to all people. You can't be a school that does everything.
So let me stop you right there. You obviously decided not to do some things. And to that point, that you can't be all things. And you have to choose because that's one of Michael Porter's great points about strategy. Strategy is deciding what you're not good at, and therefore you don't do. So what kinds of things don't we do? What have we decided not to do?
Well, like UNC in general, we haven't. We've had a couple opportunities to go in on bricks and mortar deals for education in other countries, and I've right off the bat said we don't do that.
Yeah.
We've had a number.
I think you made the right call.
Oh my God! And I think UNC has made the right call in that. I don't think most of the experiments in bricks and mortar have worked. We've had a number of opportunities to take students from other countries and give up the authority over admissions. And to me, that is a non-negotiable. I'm just not going to negotiate that. We don't do it. We've had faculty members who want to build new kinds of degrees or start new departments, and so far we've added degrees but not departments. I mean, I've said we're really good at these things. We're not going to add new departments.
See, I really commend you for that, and I think therein you've kept the focus of this school on what it does well, and it's not. That is not a simple matter itself, because it's already a very complex school.
It is.
How many departments?
7 departments, and then the public health leadership program.
So it's a complex organism in itself.
It is.
But I think you and your faculty have a very keen sense of what you're about.
I think we do.
And
I think we do.
I think that's one of the keys to its strength, and you've just gotten better at all these things.
Thank you.
So that leads me to another question. Obviously, there's been a lot of strategic planning going on to this, but that involves ultimately some sort of top-down decisions, or decisions that may appear to be top-down, such as the concentration on obesity or the concentration on water, and And one of the things I know from my experience in the academy is that faculty don't like to be told where to
No.
do their research.
No,
I mean,
they don't.
faculty they're self-driven.
Right.
And they can be quite independent. So how do you balance that? Having some sort of let's say they're agreed upon, but they're still top-down decisions that we're going to focus on these areas, and with the faculty's right, in their sense, to do what they want to do and
Right.
to research the things that they want to research. How do you square that circle?
Well, I think it's a very interesting and uniquely academic problem, and business people who look at it say,
They don't understand.
no,
this.
well, just tell them what to do.
Right.
Well, you know, and I know, you can't just tell them what to do, and I would never tell a faculty member that they can or cannot study a particular area. But what I know as a behavioral scientist, and what I really learned when I was at the National Institutes of Health, is that you can incentivize people.
Yeah.
And so what we have done is we've said, we have these strategic initiative areas. When we have discretionary funds, that's where we're going to put the money. So you can study whatever you want, but we're not going to put additional funding in that area. We're going to put additional funding into these areas so we can get even better. And getting even better means having more impact. And I think faculty members actually get the idea of focus areas.
That's the way the NIH operates.
Right, it is. And the idea of providing incentives. And I think one of the things that really shocked me when I was at the NIH was how little money it takes to provide an incentive to get people to do something.
Yeah.
You know, a few $1,000s for a junior faculty member may be helpful in getting some data. You don't have to necessarily put millions of dollars into something.
But what we're describing here is a strategy for getting from point A to point
Right.
B. Of obviously using incentives as an enticement.
Right.
It's still their decision.
Right, absolutely. We don't undermine autonomy of
Right.
faculty members. They can study whatever they want, if they can get money for it.
That's right. And I think for someone who may be watching this, that's a strategy that works in an academic setting, so people can use this in other schools or colleges where obviously there's a strategic initiative to do something, and you have to convince people.
Right.
We have no power as administrators.
No.
We only have the ability to persuade.
Right, we have
and
persuasive power.
Yeah.
And you know, and the idea that you can make something enticing and that they don't have to do it.
Right.
I mean, that's human behavior. And
Absolutely. But I think it's the art of leadership in this setting, and the art of strategy, which is I think really a huge issue. So let's expand that even to a wider framework. Talk about how you incent your faculty to collaborate not only with colleagues in the School of Global Public Health, but elsewhere on campus, or with Duke University, or with University of Michigan, or with Johns Hopkins or Harvard. How does that come about?
well, you know, an awful lot of it comes about spontaneously from faculty members because they're doing research in
Right.
particular areas. So there's tremendous amount of collaboration that happens with universities all over the world. I mean, Ralph Barrick, who studies infectious diseases like SARS, Ralph couldn't do his work without collaborating with other universities. So there's a tremendous amount of that is spontaneous and doesn't need any attention from me or the chairs. In some cases, there's an initiative, and we think that that people should get together, and so we might have our Associate Dean for Research work with people from other organizations. Most of the time, our faculty they're kind of engineered to want to
Right.
collaborate, because
Right.
in public health, most of the research that we do is dependent on large samples. It is interdisciplinary. But when we designed the criteria for the Gillings laboratory, for the Gills, we built in interdisciplinary, and we encouraged people to
Right.
work with people across the university and beyond.
Right.
So again, we built it into the framework so that one of the criteria for evaluation was interdisciplinary. And some of that, I've been studying interdisciplinarity just kind of on the side for many years.
Right.
And when I was at the NIH, it was under my watch that we created transdisciplinary tobacco centers. And I personally love working in an interdisciplinary climate. So it's easy for me to talk about it. And
Right.
it's easy for me to say to people, this would be so much better if you had people from multiple disciplines, because I actually believe it.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I
it's
think
so
it's
gratifying.
I think it's much of our success. I would just want to say this is due to the fact that you are so supportive of this, as
Well,
in
thank
your
you.
role as dean. And I
Thank
think
you.
we've talked, as you know, with some of your colleagues, and Shelley Earp at Lineberger and Bob Lewin at Pharmacy and
Yes.
Mike Cohen in Global Health.
Right.
And they all talk about interaction with the School of Public Health
Oh,
and in a very positive sense.
Well, they're important to, those places are
And
important to
as
us.
you know, the climate on this campus has been one that's really fomented that. But I've also, I don't think I've ever mentioned this to you, but I've actually heard the School of Public Health at UNC ask Duke's School of Public Health.
Yes.
Since Duke
Yes.
doesn't have a public
Right.
health school, and I
Right.
know you have really great constructive relationships
We do.
with a lot of faculty at Duke University,
do.
especially at the medical school at Duke.
And that's been a long-term collaborations. And in
Right.
fact, we were so proud that Victor Zhao,
Right.
the chancellor of the medical school
Right.
there, his daughter got her MPH at our school. And
didn't know that, yeah.
you know, and so Victor would joke that we're his school. And you know, and I said, well, and proud to be your school.
Right, right.
You know, I still have an adjunct appointment in community and family medicine at Duke.
Right.
And that's important to me because I want them to see me as reaching out. And yesterday I was signing adjunct letters for faculty, and I noticed in a group of about 20, I think there were 3 or 4 Duke faculty that we have as adjunct faculty.
Right.
So, you know, those kinds of connections are so important.
They are really important, and people on the outside don't realize that. That, in fact, earlier you mentioned the power of this triangle, the power of the triangle.
Yes.
These 3 universities plus RTI plus Glaxo plus Gillings plus all Quintiles.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
these things which
It's-
which make
it's a
this
force.
really an important force for this nation.
Yeah,
and make us
absolutely.
competitive in the world. So.
And James, let me just give you one more example of how we encourage and facilitate this interdisciplinarity. So Michael Kozarok is chairman of biostatistics, and he came to me and he said, I'd like to do a program project to try to figure out how you can get clinical trials done faster. So new methods, which means patients benefit faster
Right.
because we answer the questions. But he knew he didn't have all the key pieces at UNC. So he wanted to go off to his colleagues at Duke and NC State and partner, and he wanted me to put in a small amount of money to help them get started. Well, I was delighted to do that, and they got funded with the largest program project ever awarded to biostatisticians.
Wow.
And there's a leader the overall leader is here at UNC, but there's also a leader at NC State and a leader at Duke. And they're coming up with fabulous discoveries about how you new methods for clinical trials.
Well, that's great.
You know, and that's taking our best talent across the triangle.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
and I just think that's what we should be about.
I do too. And that is really the power of the combination of these great institutions. Now I want to turn to a subject that's not as much fun, because we've been talking about all the great success and really the glory of this school and your leadership. But you've been through some tough times.
It's
in the
been a hard
last
few years.
In the last few years. For the point of reference, we're making this interview in the summer of 2013 for people who might be watching it in the future. But the last 4 years have been really tough.
Really
Would you
tough.
just describe sort of what the impact of that is and how bad has it been in terms of what we're talking about is our massive hits to the budget of the whole university and how that's impacted your school?
Well, it's been really difficult, and it really reached a peak in probably 2010. In that year, we laid off about 30 people, and we could well have to lay off more people this year. For me, those layoffs were really personal.
Yeah.
I mean, you know those people. You see them in the grocery store here.
Right.
They're real people.
Right.
We worked really hard. Almost all of them got jobs, but they were doing jobs in our school that we really needed. I made the decision to give up the senior associate dean in the school.
Wow.
That was really painful, and it has repercussions that keep, that I continue to feel, because there's nobody that I'm giving some of the work that I need to give to somebody else on a daily basis. We made the decision to make cuts without cutting our enrollment. And you know how important it is in this state to keep up enrollment. You also know that you cannot continue to teach the same number of people with fewer TAs and fewer adjunct and contract faculty, and we've made cuts in all of those areas. So faculty are having to teach courses without TAs when they would have had TAs before. It's been really painful, and you know, the fact that our staff, our SPA staff in the school, have had almost no raises in, you know, going on 5 years.
Right.
It's so painful. You know, I mean, we have people in our school and other schools that are bagging groceries at Harris Teeter.
Right.
And, you know, that really hurts me personally. And so it's a collective hit, but we've had to you know, I think it's been so important to take this hit without being demoralized and without making people feel that the school is a weaker place. So, you know, on the one hand, I feel as a leader, I have to talk about the damage, you know, that we've lost over 20% of our state funding over the years, and it's recurring. So it's you don't just take the hit and then, as you know, and then go get better next year. You take the hit and then you take another hit and then you take another hit. But I think it's so important that we have to keep talking about, but we are still a strong institution. You know, we are still a top school of public health. We still are doing great things.
But it is a major challenge to leadership.
Oh, it's horrible.
And what you're saying is also it's a personal challenge, and it's a draining kind of psychologically and emotionally draining.
It is, and you know, because we live in a small town.
Right.
You see the people whose jobs you cut, and I think that is just so personally, it's just so difficult. Yeah.
So as we sit here, we don't know yet we're facing another budgetary cycle.
We are.
I think from reading the tea leaves, more cuts are yet to come.
I think so too.
And so it's the challenge continues.
It does.
Yeah.
And you know, it's how do you keep a great school even greater in the face of all that? And it means one of the things you have to do is look for other revenue sources. So we just formed a partnership with RTI to create a consortium on implementation science, one of the hottest areas in science, with the idea that in some areas, partnering with them will help us because they are more nimble in some ways. They have a grants machine that is probably unequaled. And by partnering with them, we're likely to be able to go after certain kinds of initiatives that we might not have succeeded on our own. Not NIH funding, but more contract funding. So, I mean, we're constantly looking at how can we do things differently? How can we partner in order to become stronger?
Because we should point out that the cuts you faced they've been huge cuts from the state of North Carolina, but we've also faced federal sequestration and who knows about the future of federal research funding. So all of that is uncertain.
And I mean, just this year, as we had made offers to a number of new students, we were told that the public health traineeships that we have were being canceled, you know, forever. So we had $58,000 that we had made offers to students for that we now were going to have to pick up because we weren't going to tell those students we weren't going to support them.
Right. So do you think, will you keep enrollment at steady, or might you at some point have to reduce enrollment?
I really want to keep it steady. You know, if we were to get another few years of cuts, then we might have to question enrollment. But first of all, there's such a great need in public health.
Right.
And I really feel like it's a commitment to the state, and it's kind of our part in the university that we, you know, that we're not going to undermine that.
Right.
But everybody has a breaking point, and you can only push faculty so far.
Right. All right. I just want to observe that's, I think, a major challenge of leadership.
It is.
And you're handling it really well, in my opinion.
Thank you, James. I really appreciate that.
And I just admire the way both the candor, but also the compassion with which you've dealt with this. And I think it speaks well of you and your faculty colleagues who've really picked up, and the staff, whom we don't celebrate enough.
I know.
Those
our
hardworking
staff
people.
are amazing.
Talk about the water Water in Our World initiative, because that's one of the special thrusts that I
It
think,
is.
which became a university-wide initiative under Holden Thorpe's leadership, but it really emanated from the Gillings School.
It did. And so, partly because of you, because you were chancellor at the time, we were able to recruit Jamie Bartram from
Right.
the World Health Organization. And Jamie, as you know, is a really charismatic, very broad thinker. And the work that he did in water right after he came here was just amazing. I mean, he hosted a conference that for the first time he had it, brought in 400 people from all over the world. And it got us thinking in new ways about our role in water, which has been profound from the beginning of the school 75 years ago. But there was in the new academic plan, they recommended a theme, and we immediately thought water.
Right.
Because it touches so many parts of the university, and there's the opportunity for music and art and drama and marine sciences and all of those areas. And so we wrote something up, and we started lobbying and getting colleagues around the university to endorse it. And frankly, it looked for a while like nothing was going to happen.
Yeah.
And that was a place where our entrepreneur in residence, Don Holsworth, was able to go to Holden Thorpe and say, this is a really good time for an academic theme. And water is just perfect. And Holden did announce it and created a committee. And I thought it was brilliant to select Terry Rhodes as the co-chair for that with Jamie Bartram. Because to put somebody from the humanities, the chair of music, with an environmental scientist, instantly sent a message that this isn't just about public health or marine sciences or the Institute for the Environment. This is about the whole university. And before I came over today, I was looking at the archive of events, and there has been work in, of course, all the scientific areas, which you would expect, and I'm proud of that, but also art and poster exhibits and photography and
Carolina Performing Arts.
Yeah, music and I was just noticing that the journalism school has led this. This new has developed a movie that was nominated for an Emmy that has a water focus, and it's just wonderful. And I think the breadth of activities has been really unifying for the campus and exhilarating and energizing.
Right.
And it shows what happens when you can take a great university and you take a great problem. I mean, water is one of the 21st century's greatest challenges. I mean, wars have been fought over it. Wars will be fought over it. In Syria, water is a major issue.
And in the American West. I mean, that's the Colorado River is literally drying up. And what is Los Angeles and Phoenix, what are they going to do once their water's gone?
Exactly. And so to take one of the world's greatest problems like that and to have it looked at from people around the university, that's what we should be all about, right? So, I'm just so thrilled and excited that our school has played such a fundamental role in it.
And I agree with you. I think having, and I hope this is something the university will continue to do.
I hope so too.
To focus on big ideas sequentially. That doesn't mean, and it doesn't mean that we're not focused on other big ideas. But
absolutely.
But it's a way to bring the resources of a great university together to talk about a huge topic. So you've been dean for 8 years.
Yes, I'm going into my ninth year.
If I were about to become a dean, what could you tell me about what you've learned about being the dean of a comprehensive, a really great institution such as the Gillings School?
Well, first of all, I feel so privileged to have been able to do this. But I think you have to go in there not thinking that you know most of the answers. And I know that sounds kind of trite, but when I first became dean, I did focus groups with a number of the faculty and staff and students, because I come out of a tradition of, you learn from the people and you try to understand their perceptions. And some of the lessons I learned during those early focus groups and meetings are still with me. I mean, I'm still continuing to benefit from them. I think the idea, and Jim Collins talked about this, that there can be no question that your dedication as a dean is to the school and to making the school great and keeping the school great, and that it's not about yourself. And I think there can be no conflict at all, no conflict of commitment between the dean as the dean and the dean's own. There can't be a personal agenda. The agenda to me has to be about the school. I mean, I love the school. You know, I get calls from other universities, and I know, and I'm not criticizing anybody who's,
Right.
you know, but for me, I could never be a dean at another university because I believe in this school.
Yeah.
I didn't go here, but I believe in this school. And I think you have to bring passion and commitment and love, and you have to really care about the people. And then you have to, I never thought of myself before as a competitive person. But I am a competitive person, you know. I was listening to your interview talking about competition, you know, a little bit about your own perceptions about it. But I think that you really have to study the competition, just like any business.
Right.
And, you know, you have to know what they're doing, and you have to know what you're doing, and you have to be aware that it is a competition, and that part of your responsibility to the school is to take it to the next step. And I think you also have to be willing to make hard choices. The choice about the name, you know, that was a hard choice.
Right.
I think it was the right choice, and I think that's been shown to be the case. But you have to be willing to take people on, and they're not going to love you all the time.
Right,
you know,
right.
They may not love you a lot of the time, but you have to listen to them. When I first became dean, I started a monthly lunch with the dean, where we invite 4 faculty each time to come and present their work. And it's been so valuable to me to learn about the work of people in the school, but also they needed to be heard. You know, faculty, as you know, they need to be listened to.
Right.
And we have chat with the deans for students, and we have other ways of getting staff input. But I think really hearing from people and connecting with them is so important.
Yeah.
You know, and we do so much work where we're thinking about bringing in money and donors, but really it's so important to live the life of the people in the school and to understand them, because you're so dependent on them for the quality of the place.
Right.
And you know, those people are really important to me, and I've gotten to know, you know, from being chancellor and dean and other roles that you've played, that you learn things about the faculty and staff, and you know about their illnesses and their marriages and children and divorces, and when we've had some faculty members who've become very ill and have died, and I've ended up speaking at their memorials, and a job I never thought I would have.
Right.
You know, but because you become important in their lives, and they become important in theirs. And I think a lot of people, when they become deans, they don't understand how involved you're going to become with people, and that's such a fundamental part of the job.
You said, I think what you said was just really very important, that these kinds of leadership jobs are, if you're really successful, it's not about you.
It can't be.
It's about the real joy of this job is helping other people be successful.
It is. It is.
And then the second thing you said, which just reminds me, that ultimately it's almost a pastoral role.
It is. It is.
You have a flock.
Yeah, you do.
And you're there for you to care for.
Yeah.
You're the shepherd of this flock.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that when one of our faculty, Michael Kozerak, who I mentioned earlier, was named a Keenan Distinguished Professor this year. And we got the call when our Charlotte Nunez-Wolf and one other, Elizabeth French, and I were sitting in a meeting. Charlotte's our business dean. And we stood up and we were cheering. You know, it was just the 3 of us, but we were cheering. And then I got on the phone and I called Michael. And because him getting that professorship, it was as exciting as if I had gotten a Keenan. You know what I mean? Because we had nominated him. We had the strategy for how we were going to get Michael selected as a Keenan, because it was so important. And you know, I think having the joys that people in the school experience as your joy is so important.
That's right.
And you know, I was thinking of something else with you, James. You use the metaphor of music a lot. And I use the metaphor of science and being a scientist and thinking about what I do as experiments. Like everything we do isn't going to work. I think having those metaphors is really important to leadership.
It's a good point. I like that point.
You know, you've talked about.
Right.
I mean, I've thought about you and music and leadership. And,
Well, it's an easy because I can do that. I can internally do that.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
It's what I know best.
It's authentic.
Right.
I mean, it's who you are, and I
Right.
think of the world in
Yeah.
science. You know,
Yeah.
so it works for me.
That's good. So, final question: looking ahead, looking 10 or 20 years ahead, what do you imagine for the School of Global Public Health?
Well, you know, we did this SPH 2020 exercise. What kind of a school do we want it to be? And I was really glad that people talked about values like diversity and inclusiveness and excellence and global. And I hope the school is all of those things.
Yeah.
I think we're putting that in place. I think we've brought some really great additional hires to the school. I hope that we can keep bringing those kinds of people. But the values, you know, the bedrock values about serving the state, reducing health disparities, being a place of excellence, I think the school will be all of those things. You know, I hope that the state, that the citizens will still continue to invest in the university the way they have, because we couldn't be
Right.
the great school that we are without that.
Right.
And I hope I've been a good enough leader that somebody really great will want to follow me because I've made the school a little bit better.
I'm sure that's the case. I'm absolutely certain that's the case. And I just want to say, to conclude, this school is one of the gems in Carolina's crown, and you are a great leader for it. And I think
Well, thank you.
it continues to prosper and grow. And I love the fact that even though we've become fully global, to go back to the very beginning of this conversation, we've not lost one bit of our commitment to the smallest village in North Carolina, and to the poorest citizen in this state, that it reaches
That's right.
all the way from those most needy people in wherever in North Carolina to across the globe, and it reaches out across this university, reaches out to our neighboring institutions, and it is truly a great institution. Thank you, Barbara.
Well, thank you, James.
Thank you for your leadership and for keeping the Gillings Global School of Public Health great.
Well, thank you. And James, I will always feel just so personally connected to you as the person who hired me, as the chancellor who hired me. And you were a part of our great gift. And you've been a part of a lot of the big events in the school. And I really want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.